Our next speaker is Stephanie Mann. Stephanie is the Chief Strategy Officer at Live Oak Bank. In this role, she's responsible for corporate strategy, strategic investments, including Live Oak Ventures and Live Oak Private Wealth. Stephanie has over 2 decades of experience in the field of advising companies on capital structure, growth strategy, capital raising. One reason we invited Stephanie to come speak with all of you today is she also has spoken to our Leadership Institute on strategic thinking, about how to think about not just your organizations, but also yourself in a strategic thinking way, and how to use some of those principles to get you out of the daily grind and the muck and the mire. And so since our Institute is a smaller pool, she talked with them last week about this speech, so we wanted to bring it to you, to the wider audience, so that everyone could hear a chance to hear from her. So Stephanie is coming to the stage to talk to us about Coast to Coast and making the most of your journey.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. That was like my own personal pep session before, I got to say, I love you, Stephanie, right before I go up and give a speech. So if you could go before me every time, I think it increases the odds of this going well. So just a quick survey to get us started. Raise your hand if you work with anybody who you think has a great attitude. You like working with them a lot. And keep it raised if you would ever hire them if you had the opportunity in a future company. All right, great. Now raise your hand if you work with anybody who works really hard, goes the extra mile, extra effort. And keep it raised if that's the kind of person you want on a group project or on your team. All right, all pretty obvious, right? That's what I'm talking about today. Attitude and effort. Those are the qualities we see in superstars. We spend a lot of time in the corporate world especially talking about technical skills, computers, math, writing, just the hard skills. But these soft skills of attitude and effort, those are the skills that will be common among all of the really successful folks. So the good news about that is those are 2 things that are totally in your control, right? You control your attitude and effort. Nobody else is responsible for those. The bad news is they're not actually easy. Coming to work every day with a positive attitude, kind of hard. Coming to work every day and going the extra mile, I don't even make it to the gym. An extra mile seems really far. So I've got a few stories for you on attitude and effort, but I'm going to start by going back a little bit, tell you a little bit about myself. As mentioned, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Live Oak Bank. I have the privilege of running our venture capital business, private wealth, fintech partnerships, and corporate strategy. Everybody who works there, I feel like they could write a book on attitude and effort, and there'd probably be another chapter on innovation, but that's separate. And I'm lucky to work with them because it's an inspiring place to be. I grew up in Northern California. I was a high performer in school, so I didn't have to work as hard as some of the other kids. And I loved sports. I played volleyball, field hockey, and I ran track. And my hard truth was I was really mediocre at sports. I loved them, but I just really wasn't that great. And so in sports is where I learned to be the first person at practice, to work hard through practice, stay after for extra reps, work out on the weekends. And all of that mentality played into me being successful when I got to Stanford, and where I was actually, for the first time, a very mediocre student. And so I applied those skills to really help me thrive there. Following Stanford, I did some consulting. I worked at a couple of software startups. I can tell you guys lots of .com bust stories another time. Came east to Wharton, and then eventually went into investment banking with Citigroup, which is where I spent most of my career. I worked in the mergers and acquisitions group, global deals, super exciting, lots of pressure, really smart people, and grew a lot during that career. So I have 3 stories I want to share from you, all from my early days of investment banking. I feel like I could tell you guys like 3,000 stories from investment banking, but I picked 3 that are about attitude and effort. So First, I'm going to tell you a story that relates to attitude. And attitude is sort of a funny word because for me, it actually has a lot to do with confidence. Showing up with the attitude that you can contribute, right? That you can make a positive impact on where you're working. And somebody once said to me, Steph, you must have really thick skin from all those years on Wall Street. I was like, I don't think I have thick skin, but I do feel pretty confident. I know I'm not the best in the room, but I definitely feel like I'm worthy of my seat there and that I can make a contribution. And I've learned that along the way, and that's helped me. So this story was from one of my first projects. We were advising a multi-billion-dollar company that was for sale, and my job was to help build the financial forecast of the company in Excel. And my boss, the managing director, set up a call for me with the CFO to ask him all these questions so I could go back and build the model. And I was super intimidated by the call. Big company, CFO, really nervous, didn't exactly know what I was doing. And at the end of the call, I turned to my boss and was like, that was really great. But I kept this separate list of questions of things I didn't understand what he was saying, and I'm hoping you can walk me through them. And she looked at me and she was like, what the heck is wrong with you? I was like, what do you mean? She said, you had the CFO on the phone. You didn't want to ask any of the questions then? Now you're going to have to call him back. I was like, oh my God, what a waste. And it really hammered home for me that my responsibility in having a good attitude is owning that call. And so for me, the lesson is, you can be nervous and you can be insecure, but if you want to be really excellent at your work, you have to take responsibility for getting the information you need to be excellent. And that was on me. So if you ever are in meetings and everybody leaves and no one knows what the next steps are, or somebody gives you something to do and you don't know exactly what it is, you're setting yourself up for failure. So you need to have the confidence and the attitude to ask about that. I totally forgot I had slides. This is going to be great. All right, now I can have a guide. Second story about effort. And this one is about doing the hard things. So when I started in investment banking, this was my very first project. And one of the guys who recruited me, Stavros Sibiridis, said to me in a Greek accent that I can't repeat, but Steph, the learning curve here is really steep. You should probably get up it quick. And I was like, great, thanks for that. That was really helpful. So this first project was the merger of two big public companies. It was a $40 billion deal that never ended up getting done. But it was really high stakes, and we were building this massive Excel merger model. The analyst's job was to build the model. My job was to check it. And so we split up, and I go to my desk, and I'm like, oh, I don't know how to check his work because I don't know how to do what he does. This is going to be a problem. And so I decided I had to learn how to do his job, too, at the same time. And so every time he went to his desk to work on a piece of the model, I would literally run to mine and see if I could do it as fast as him. And that didn't happen. But I got better and better. It was pretty ugly at first. It started to improve. And once I had the hang of it, I was able to do my job better. And this was me not being afraid of doing the hard things, right? I knew it was going to be embarrassing. I had to tell this guy, many years my junior, I had no idea what I was doing, and could he actually check my work? And during that period of time, I was thinking about it, I was like, probably, you could say I was working 2 jobs, but given how slowly I did his job, it was probably more like 3. And it was because of my bar of excellence in that role and the guidance that I got from other people to get up that learning curve quickly that I rolled up my sleeve to do the hard things. It's human nature to avoid the hard things. We all do it. I mean, somebody will say, who's going to review this contract? And everybody who wasn't trained in law, their eyes get blurry and they're like, oh, not me, I can't review a contract. But some people are going to do it and they're going to learn a lot doing it. So whatever it is that's hard in your job that other people aren't raising their hands to do, that's what you should be doing. My third story is about my very favorite analyst. She now works for World Bank and lives in Austria. Natalia Donde. She went to University of Chicago, graduated at the age of 20, and came to Wall Street to do investment banking. She was, fortunately for me, too young to go to the bars, and so she worked a lot. And so we had a lot of fun together. But we were working on a project for a private equity firm that was trying to buy a huge retail chain of stores, so like a few hundred stores in the country. And the seller of that business, in this scenario, they put together the financial model and sent it to us so we could do all the work on it and tell, the private equity firm, this is what we think you should pay for it. So we're there on a Sunday morning waiting for the model to be sent over. It comes over, and it's in PDF. Like, who does that? 250-page or something PDF of this Excel model. We're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So fortunately, Citigroup has a production center that can convert those things into Excel, but they said it's watermarked and you need legal to sign off on it, or we can't convert it for you. So it's Sunday, it's 2004, like a lot of people don't have cell phones, and if they do, we don't have their phone numbers. So we're just sitting there sort of stuck. We called the lawyer for the M&A group. He wasn't available. And I was completely stuck. And she goes, I know what we're gonna do. And she goes into the intranet for Citi and pulls up the global directory for all of Citigroup and sorts it by New York and people in the legal department, and starts at A and just starts calling to see who's at work on a Sunday. She calls people in branches, she's calling people in the cards business, she's calling people in capital markets, and eventually some poor commercial banker who was at work on a Sunday gets a call from Natalia Donde, and he signs the doc for us so we could get the deal done. And it's just I learned a lot from her about both attitude and effort. She's what we would say in investment banking is a person who will run through walls for you. And I learned a tremendous amount working with her and from her effort. So all of this to say, if you want to be successful, focus on the two things you can control. Your attitude, make it positive. Your effort, make it extra, right? This is how it shows up a little bit in your day-to-day life. So these are just some like super nuts and bolts things that I always find are useful for takeaways. Like, what does it look like to actually have more attitude or effort? Not like have more attitude, but you know what I mean. Check your work. So before you turn something in, I cannot tell you how disappointing it is as a manager to receive work that's sloppy, right? It just demonstrates a lack of effort and somebody who really doesn't care about my time. So I used to tell analysts when they were dropping work off at my desk, before you hand that to me, have you checked it? And 100% of the time, they would be like, no, and go back to their desk and check it one more time. And they would always find something. It didn't come back right away. So that's one important tip. 2, prep for meetings. So I have everybody on my team send out an agenda and pre-read. It makes the meetings more effective. It shows respect for the other people's time. It's just really good practice. Maybe other people will start doing it too, and then your meetings all get better. Like, wouldn't that be great if we all raise the bar for meetings? Maybe it can start here today. Learn about your business. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the silo that you're in, but if you learn about the business you're in just by talking to your colleagues, you will be so much better at your job with that context. You will understand why your piece is important and how it impacts other people's pieces. And it will enable you to take on more leadership opportunities in the company. Tap the experts. So this was a funny one for me to learn, because if you asked a bunch of people for help with things in school, you were cheating. But then once you get into life, you're clever. You know, call experts. People have done a lot of the stuff you're doing before. Do not reinvent the wheel. Ask the people who know the most, is this a good job? Am I thinking about this the right way? Is this the way to present the information? How do you make your presentation materials effective? But tap the experts. 5, pitch in. We had a rule in investment banking that you couldn't go home until you walked the floor, and you asked everybody in the office who needed help. No task too big or small. You're making copies for a meeting tomorrow, I got that. You know, you're binding books for your meeting tomorrow, I can do that too. You want me to read through this thing for typos? I can do that. It's 11 o'clock at night. We should all go home soon. So nobody had to stay. Everybody had to make that offer. And if your workload is light, even if people say no thanks, you know, it's a good thing to do. It shows how much you feel like part of a team. Participate. This is a real pet peeve of mine. I had a client, and I loved this. They had a sign on every conference room door that said, before you walk in here, think about whether or not you're needed in this meeting. And if you're not, please go back to your desk. I mean, how great is that? I would love permission to do that. If you're going to be in that meeting, and if you were invited there, it should be because you have a reason to be in that room, and they need you and want you to participate. Your perspective matters. Ask questions. Understand what role you play there. Help the meeting move forward and come to conclusion. And finally, the sort of universal theme here is be confident. Know that you have a role that you're worthy of and that you can deliver great things. And when you put all of these things together, it actually looks a lot like leadership. And this is what it means to grow in your careers, to do all of these kinds of things. So in conclusion, your success hinges on two things within your control: attitude and effort. You should choose problem solving over complaining. You should tackle tough tasks head on. Have a positive, go the extra mile attitude, and all of that together will result in really great leadership opportunities for you. Thank you.